Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. Today we're going to be doing another mock check ride, and this one's going to be an instrument mock check ride in a Cherokee 6. Now, a Cherokee 6, it's a quick little IFR machine, 350 horsepower, seats 6, and it's decently equipped with a Garmin 430 that's WAAS capable, along with dual GU5s and a VOR. We're going to be talking about how all that equipment works and whether or not the student knows how to use it. The student did all right when it came to weather and reading, an approach plate, even a SID and a star, but they were a little weak when it came to route selection. But we made some adjustments and fixed that route right up. One other fumble they made is it was pretty clear that they hadn't read through the supplements or manuals for their STC equipment in their aircraft. Remember, your old airplane didn't come with those fancy avionics. You need to know the new limits that have been placed on your aircraft with that new equipment. Also, you shouldn't be learning your new avionics in flight. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, cup of water if you don't like caffeine, and sit and read those manuals. You spent 20 to 40 grand on avionics, read the book. All right? But after we cleared all those things up, I feel like this student did pretty well, but I want you to let me know down in the comments. How do you think this student did? And as always, if you enjoy these mock check rides, don't forget, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you can get notified every time we drop a new mock check ride. And YouTube's implemented this new hype points feature for smaller creators. So if you got hype points, hype it up. One other thing though, the Seaplane adventures, they're going to be moving to a separate channel. The way that the YouTube algorithm works is it's kind of hard to have multiple subjects on one channel. You end up just diluting yourself in the algorithm. So we're going to be moving all of the Seaplane adventures over to my other channel, The Lake Effect. So I'll try to put a little link up here somewhere for that channel. So if you enjoy the Seaplane content, go ahead and drop a follow over there. And without further ado, let's roll the mock check ride. Awesome. You're working towards your instrument rating. Tell us kind of how what's kind of led you to this point. How's your training been going? What have you been training in so far? Has it all been the same airplane? Has it all been the same instructor?
Right on. So pure hobby for me. I remember, I think as a teenager, I saw a glider land on a field next to our house. And ever since, there was this fascination about airplanes. And maybe even more so, my dad was a trained car mechanic. So I took my first engine apart when I was 8 or 9 and always been fascinated with anything that has power, anything from motorcycles to boats to, I felt like plane is the ultimate engine, right, to control. So about 3 years ago, time and money finally worked out. I got my PPL. I'm part of a flying club here in Raleigh out of RDU. So got my PPL with them 3 years ago. Then life got too busy and I finally got back this year on the instrument rating. Reason I'm looking forward is right now it's a ton of fun to do local flights, right? Take some buddies up, do a bit of sightseeing. But as soon as I start thinking about, can I go to the coast from here in the morning and come back in the evening, the chance that there isn't going to be a cloud in the way, right, is pretty tough. So yeah, really, really looking for this instrument rating to be able to truly do trips going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the big things about an instrument rating is you're not going to be stuck somewhere because of a little bit of clouds. It,
Right on. I'm looking at the sky
I
right
have
now, and
buddies
this is the perfect example where I'm guessing they're hanging below 2000 right now, and it feels like this would be a nice day to go up, but currently I can't.
nope.
And yeah, in terms
I
of
have buddies that go
sorry, I
ahead.
was just going to finish up in terms of training in aircraft. So I trained for my PPL on PA-28s. Then we got a couple sundowners that were pretty fun to take people in, just roomier cabin, right? A bit more space. And then last year I did a quick spin training and finished on my tail wheel endorsement in a super decathlon. And started picking out the Cherokee 6 now that I've done my instrument training in. So getting a little faster, a little bigger, and it's a really fun plane to fly. Really, really like the Cherokee 6.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many of them left. I know that. I might be thinking the Comanche actually. Yeah, no, the Cherokee 6 is a wonderful plane, 300 horsepower. It actually gets you going somewhere at a reasonable clip. Its fuel burn it's a little bit more,
But like for us, I think it's
right?
14 gallons most of the time. I remember the PA-28s, I was probably at 10 or 9 or so. And it's the most fun thing
Yeah.
was actually going backwards now. So I think maybe 3 or 4 months into instrument training and just flying the 6, I flew a Warrior again. And I remember on the takeoff roll, I was like, what's wrong with the engine? Why is this not accelerating? What's going on here? And then showing up on climb again too. I was like, do I still
Oh,
have flaps in? Why am I getting 300 feet per minute? This is crazy.
yeah. What is this thing? I flew this. Yeah, yeah. I get that feeling because I got a buddy. He flies a 150, and we hop in it together. Very rarely do we hop in that airplane together, but when we get into it, I'm like, "You fly this thing like like all the time? Like this thing's okay?" He's like, "Yeah, man. Yeah, engine only has 500 hours on it." I was like, "Oh, okay." Uh,
Awesome.
awesome, awesome. So Cherokee 6, wonderful airplane. I'm looking at your route. I'm assuming it's got GPS
Yes,
based on the route that you've sent me. All right.
correct.
We'll talk about more about that later on.
Yep.
But every check ride, you've already taken your private pilot check ride, so every check ride, right? It's got three possible outcomes. It's got satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and incomplete. Satisfactory really just means you're consistently within inside standards. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't momentarily fall outside the standards. Um, as long as you apply a prompt and appropriate correction to get yourself back within the standards, right? Um, Unsatisfactory, this would be things like you're a danger to yourself, danger to the national airspace system, you don't understand safety related information, bust through minimums and stay down there, lose situational awareness, don't recognize it, or do recognize it and don't do anything about it. Then you've got, incomplete. There's things like weather, there's things like aircraft airworthiness that um, you caught during the pre-flight. An example I like to use is there was a DPE. They told this horror story of a student that it was for their instrument rating, and right before they got in the airplane, the mechanic came out and put in an update card for the avionics. Right, they threw an SD card in the avionics to update them because well, it needed an update. And the student went to take off with update in progress still displayed over all of the screens.
That's not good.
So the appropriate action for the student would have been, hey, we should probably delay even taxiing out until this update is complete, right? But instead, students like power, engine instruments in the green. No, we're not doing this, right?
Yep.
So
And
that's
yeah,
the
I get it. I
example I
get it
used
early
of like,
on
well,
because it feels
yes,
like some of this stuff, at least in PPL, we're kind of rushing through, right? I remember one part where I think our mechanic laughed at me when I sent him this picture, be like, "Is this an actual squawk?" But I was soloing and got a red X over my, gosh, I can't remember what system it was in there. Maybe the one of the Garmin. But anyway, I'd never seen it. I was just like, I guess I could still fly. Maybe that's a valid squawk. Let me just take a picture of this, and I get it. You go up pretty quickly.
yep, yeah. A lot of it can be kind of like a fire hose, and especially when you get into like some of the weird avionics, like when you read 91205 and 91213, it looks like pretty plain, like, oh, yeah, okay, if those instruments are working. But then when you start looking at, STCs, like our equipment that was installed in the aircraft after the fact, you're like, well, but if I look at the STC and the STC says I also need that, and then it gets a whole lot more in depth. Or like, was there a field approval to approve these avionics without it's yeah. So, awesome. Well, instrument, as you know, means you're going to be able to get to fly into the clouds. So, really, when is an instrument rating required?
Yeah, it's really four reasons, at least for me right now, to fly in weather conditions less than VFR minimums, to file an IFR flight plan, to fly above 18,000 feet, and for special VFR at night. Eventually, or if I'm going through a commercial or something, there might be some things on top of it, like I think over 50 nautical miles when it's commercial like, but really those four for me right now.
Yeah. And I mean, once we get to, if you do start checking those boxes going to commercial, we'll talk about it because, you need your instrument privileges or whatnot for your commercial. So, let's say congratulations, you get your private pilots or you get your instrument rating, right? Everything's hunky dory, and then for some reason or another, you can't fly, whether it be money, aircraft, schedule. Everyone's got their own things going on in life, and you end up not flying for like 7 months. Are you allowed to go hop up in the clouds willy
No,
nilly?
at that point, if preceding 6 calendar months don't hold those 6 approaches, holds, intercepts, then I'm not. With that said, at the 7 month mark, I could still go up with a CFI. I could go up with a safety pilot under foggles, would have to be VFR conditions, but or jump into a simulator and get those 6 approaches back. But on that 7 month mark, I can just file and go up or go into an actual cloud.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now let's say for some reason or another, it takes you don't go flying for like 14 months, or you like don't do instrument for like 14 months because you buy your own airplane. It's a Cub, so it's not qualified for instrument rating, instrument flight. So you go 14 months without flying any kind of instrument flying. What do you need to do now? Like, what's different?
Then I need to get the IPC, the instrument proficiency check.
Okay, and who can that be done with?
A CFII?
Yep. So CFII, DPE could also conduct it. Technically, you could call the FISDO and try and schedule one with one of the DPEs with the at FISDO. They're probably not going to. They're going to tell you to go find an instructor because they're busy.
I was going to say, it seems like every DPE in the country is busy.
Yeah. Well, the reason behind that is for some reason or another, they cut the amount of DPEs that an ASI can oversee in half.
Mm,
So an ASI used to be able to oversee 10 DPEs, right? Now they've cut it down to 5. So now they can't implement more DPEs because they don't have enough ASIs to oversee the DPEs that they currently have.
Interesting.
That's why you're like, well, why doesn't the FAA just make more DPEs? Well, because they don't have enough ASIs to make more DPEs.
That is interesting. Right on. I heard some cool
So-
rants from, I did an awesome ground school for instrument with this guy who is, I think, right around 80 years now. He started flying for Continental in 1963. So that guy had stories over 40 years, flying from the 60s until the mid 2000s. It's funny, actually, when we got to GPS, he went, guys, just so you know, that's my Achilles heel. I never really flew on GPS systems. But he had a big rant about this idea of the FAA not doing check rides anymore, right? So his big point was, I feel like we're not doing good check rides anymore because DPEs don't want to be known as the really tough one, and it's their own money. And I heard that guy. I felt like, yeah, if the FAA would get back to it, that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I completely agree that the FAA going back to check rides probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And I have definitely seen some bad check rides out there. Like I know that there's a DPE up near me that like everyone goes to because you're gonna pass.
Mhm.
Like you remember, as you said earlier, Jason Shepard, he literally opens up Jason Shepard's like study guide during the check ride and asks questions directly from it. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like we can't. Like he he did my multi-engine instructor check ride, and I'm like, really? Like I was on my own check ride, and I'm just like, is this it? Like, come on.
Wow.
So it's
Just send me that name
you're right. The
quietly
FAA
after.
does need to. Well, I mean,
I'm just kidding.
I'm proud of myself. Like I studied and I worked hard for this, and now I'm just like, really? That's the M0A study guide. Come on. Awesome. So let's just pop right into your route real quick. Let me make sure I click the right button. Yep. So this is your route that you plan. You said you got GPS. So talk to me about your route.
Yes. So I had to find an airport 2 hours away based on your instructions. I was thinking before, a lot of the other cross countries I've planned were to the coast, which is just about an hour or so from where I'm at. I had to figure out something fun. So pick Chattanooga in the mountains for a potential trip, and did it through for flight, besides a weather briefing. So when I looked at it, I actually had a couple of questions of whether you would plan it similarly. So this was my first time looking really into these preferred routes and seeing what had been cleared, what had been cleared by pistons and the like. What I liked about the route, or maybe what I struggled with eventually, I started liking the beginning of the route, and I struggled a little bit with around BZM. I'm losing an airway, right? I'm not on a Victor or on a jet airway anymore. At the same time, it felt like I would really go out of my way to stay on an airway. And while it's mountainy, and I would, I guess, have to look at Orokas here if I'm not on an airway, it didn't seem crazy to me. I can do this flight at 10,000. But I was very curious in the real life scenario if you might have done that route somewhat similarly, or if you would have tried either to get on an airway there or maybe try to get through Charlotte's Bravo. Does that make sense?
Okay. Um, yeah, no, that's a lot of good questions. A lot of good questions. So let's go over that. The first thing I want to point out, what's the big issue on filing like just kind of direct to an airport? What are we losing? Like what is the risk associated with filing directly to an airport instead of staying on a route or filing to an initial approach fix?
Um, I would say really clearances eventually. So I'm looking at Orokas here rather than MEAs or the like, and ultimately issue about um, clearance, obstruction clearance, as well as reception of navigation or guidance signals.
Yeah, so I mean, there's the issues of reception of navigation. I'd be a little bit, especially with the mountains, flying general aviation, low level. I'd be a little, low level relative to the terrain. I'd be a little bit more worried about reception from ATC.
Makes
Would be
sense.
one of my big concerns here. The other thing I'd be concerned about is filing direct. If I lose comms, right? If I am flying over these mountains and for some reason this mountain blocks my ability to talk to Charlotte or whoever I happen to be talking to, I'm in lost communications. I'm going to end up having to do that weird thing. Well, I'm going to ask you if I lose communications along this direct to section where I'm going direct to Chattanooga, what am I going to do?
So I'm looking at Amy and Avenue F, basically altitude and route. So on Amy, I'm going to choose the highest of my assigned altitude, my minimum, um, or my expected altitude. Um, and on the other hand, so in this case, or I haven't gotten the clearance yet, but I filed for 10,000. So if they have me go up at Raleigh, you typically keep you at 2,000 initially, and then have you continue up maybe after 10 minutes or so. But so theoretically, that 10,000 I think is likely going to be an altitude I'll pick unless anything else happened on clearances before. And then in terms of route, I'm going through the Avenue F mnemonic. So assigned, vectored, expected, or filed in that order. So yeah, back to your question of what would happen. I think really the question of where would it happen, right? Or what have my clearances been before? But I might end up at that 8,900 Oroka, kind of close to your cursor right now, in the last comms, which wouldn't be great.
Yeah, so let's talk about the route, right? You're here, your GPS direct at this point. Let's just say that your radio died right here. Looks like 95 miles out. Okay, so radio's dead. What kind of avionics do you have? Is it like a Garmin 430, or are we looking at like a Garmin 650 or
Yeah, I
750?
have a 430 and two G5s.
Okay, so 430. So nothing that you could pull like ADSB weather or anything in, right? So if our radios are dead, we're not really able to get any real information at this point unless you've got like a Stratus
I was
puck.
going to say I do have a Stratus and my iPad on me. Yep.
Okay, so let's say radio dies right here, hard IFR. We're roughly an hour away from our destination. GPS direct to Chattanooga now. What's your plan?
Yeah. So at that point, ultimately pretty much continuing here, but to walk through it, so we don't have VFR. That means if we were in VFR, I would try to go down earlier and kind of around where I have the comms failure. So in practice, so my comms die, right? I'm going to try and troubleshoot a little bit. I'll go back to the last frequency and try a little bit on COM 1 versus COM 2, see if I can get the comms back somehow. If I can't, and I'm still in IFR, then I'm going to go through, again, my altitude and my route. In the altitude on Amy, I'm still at the 10,000 as the highest altitude that I'm going to stay at. And then I'm guessing they have either assigned me to it, or at least this is my filed one. So I would basically continue on that route and try to stay at 10,000.
Awesome. So let's say our estimated time of arrival, let's say current time is 9:45 Zulu. Our estimated time of arrival is 10:45 Zulu, and we're going to get to Chattanooga at, let's say, 10:30 Zulu. Right? We caught a tailwind up at 10,000. So we're plugging along. We recognize we're going to get to Chattanooga at 10:30 Zulu. We looked at our iPad. The weather was showing 170 at 12 knots for the wind. So what's our plan? We're getting here 15 minutes early. What runway are we going to choose? When are we going to start doing that approach? How are we going to get to the approach?
Right on. So the ETA part is interesting, and I'm struggling on that a little bit. So my first thought was when you went on the ETA, I remember it as one of the compulsory reporting when not in radar contact if my ETA changes ±3 minutes. But I don't have a way to communicate it at this point. So again, I'm blanking on this a little bit, but I think my initial thought would be that I'm going to look up the approaches here in a second. My initial idea is that I'm probably going to stay in a hold or in a procedure turn around the initial approach fix or so until I would get closer to my initial ETA and try to touch down at that point, because I just wouldn't have a way to communicate my ETA change to ATC.
That's exactly it, right? If we can't, it's okay. Let me rephrase it. It's not exactly it. Really, what you're going to do is you're going to hold at your clearance limit so that you can get to your approach and start your approach as close to your ETA as possible. That's what it is.
Got it.
Right?
And so in this case, if they cleared me to Chattanooga, I would in fact hold above the airport.
Yes.
Interesting.
And I know it feels weird.
Yep.
You're like, why am I? And that's the concern when you have a direct to route, or a route that's really just GPS direct airport, right? Because if we lose our radio, we end up doing this weird unpublished hold above the airport at our cruise altitude.
Right on.
Which doesn't really make any sense, right?
Right on. Yeah.
So back to the initial question, would I have planned it this way? No. And those are kind of the reasons why, right? I'd be concerned about maintaining communications. The entire way here, given the altitudes. And I mean, we even see mandatory reporting points right here. And mandatory reporting points are usually only associated with ATC's inability to maintain radar contact with you.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. So that filled in one shows me like, hey, if I'm just barely skimming the tops of these, it's very likely I'm not going to be able to maintain communication, because it looks like it's Atlanta that I'm going to be talking to. And I mean, it's not that far, but it's not close, you know?
That's a good call. All right. So basically take the delay, start going further south, probably go to that mandatory point and then follow that jet airway.
That would most likely be the way that I would go. Sure, ATC may very well clear you off of it and start vectoring you around, but I like to have. I'm gonna be honest. I do this too. I do this GPS direct. 4Flight says this is what people have been cleared. Recommended route. Send it. Is that the safest option? No, because I didn't look over the route. I can't even verify that, if I'm following those kind of recommended routes or those previously filed routes, I don't know what to expect on it. So I would file the full route right here. It doesn't send you out of the way that much. And it gets you to, I believe, it should get you to a fix in which you can start an approach, or at the very least, get you closer to a fix in which you can start an approach. So let's see. I think it would be runway 30 would probably be the initial approach fix. Yoda. Is that what that one is? No, that's Jill's. So past Jill's, I would probably file Yoda.
That makes sense.
Oh, I selected the wrong one.
Yep.
Gillis is what it is. I'd probably go Yoda. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, IOTA.
IOTA,
That's
yep.
what it is. It's not even Jill's.
Yeah, so Jill's
could
is
go
actually on the
Crand.
final approach course of it. So typically you would enter IOTA and then continue to Jill's on your final approach course, it looks like.
Yep, that's what it is. Sorry. So I think the better play would probably be Crand, because I can see Crand on the arrival, right? Or on the approach right
Yep.
here. There's Crand is the initial approach
Yep.
fix. So that's probably where my route would end, is at Crand, and then IOTA and Gillis wouldn't be part of it because they're part of the rest of the approach. That way, in the event of a lost comms or something like that, I'm going to an approach.
That makes sense. And then maybe one follow-up question. So if I filed only through Crand and I didn't put IOTA in, I would circle above Crand until closer to my ETA?
No, because you filed to the fix. Continue the approach. They know that that's your route. They know that's where you're going.
Even if I'm on the 15-minute early scenario?
Is the clearance limit a fix from which the approach begins? Start a descent. Oh, start a descent as close to the EFC as possible. Sorry. As close to the EFC as possible. So I would go Crand. So yes, you would go to Crand, hold at Crand, and continue the approach as close to EFC as possible, as opposed to going to Chattanooga, holding at Chattanooga at 10,000 feet, and then, going off to Crand, or given the wind that I gave you earlier, 170 at 12, you'd be, holding over Chattanooga and then going Libic or Libike.
Interesting. Right on. Yeah. And since it's a good real world scenario, holding above Crand in lost comms is up to me then, basically, whether I hold north, south, west, or on whatever radial. And I guess to be as standard as possible, I'll do right-hand turns and 4 nautical mile legs. Is that right? Or is there a specific way how I should do that hold above there?
So what I would do is, I didn't hit any mountains on my way in, so I'm going to make standard right-hand turns to go back onto the route where I didn't hit any mountains on the way in. I would hold inbound on the inbound course.
That makes sense. Right on. That makes sense. That's easier
Unless
to
there's a
turn, too.
published hold.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Unless there's a published hold, I wouldn't. I would just do that, right? So let's go over some of the fixes on our new route to make sure we can kind of read these charts. All right. So right here, this one's a black airway. What's a black airway? What's the difference between a black one and a blue one?
Yeah, so black is Victor Airways, blue are Jet Airways. Black is based on VORs, while the blue is based on GPS.
Okay, now, are the blue ones Jet Airways?
The wording of your question makes me think that that's wrong.
So Q routes are commonly referred to as Jet Airways or Jet routes because they're high altitude. This is an IFR high chart. You see how...
Got it.
Oh, come on, load. Do you see how none of your route exists on this high chart?
Yeah.
That would be kind of a Jet Airway.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
The other ones, they're just Tango routes, right? You were correct that they are GPS, but they're Tango routes. They're not really referred to as jet routes.
Tango routes versus Victor Airways. Okay, got it.
Now, how do I know what altitude I can fly at on this Victor airway?
There would be, or currently we're seeing MEAs above it at 3,100, the minimum en route altitude.
Okay, now what does the minimum en route altitude give me?
Two things, obstruction clearance and radio and radar contact.
Is it always radio and radar contact? Because remember, if we've got mandatory reporting points are usually associated with loss of radar coverage, right?
True. So it wouldn't be radar, it would be navigation coverage and radio coverage.
Yep. So we're expecting navigation coverage.
That makes sense.
Now, what's this red, or not red, sorry, what's this X that I'm looking at right here? Well, this little flag with the X in it.
There would be a minimum crossing altitude at that point.
Okay. When do I need to start my climb for a minimum crossing altitude?
I want to be...
Is it before, at, or after?
Before, because I want to be at the minimum crossing altitude when I hit the point.
Awesome. I'm happy with that. we talked about mandatory reporting points, right? I've kind of beat this horse at this point. That's how we identify them. They're filled in. What is indicated by this little squiggly line? What is this squiggly line showing me?
I need to go back to the legend to fully remember, but I think it means it's a no longer used airway or route. Let me see if I can verify
it's a
that.
Closed airway. So you're really just not going to be using that airway. It's closed. Now we got our minimum crossing altitudes here. We know we're good there. Let's go over, let's say, this approach right here, the RNAV GPS runway 15. If you want to pull it up on your side, I've only got it pulled up so that the camera could, so that we can record exactly what we're looking at.
Right on RNAV 15. And I tend to use jet chart. Is that okay to use, or should I rather go to the FAA to have what you have?
No, if you want to use JEP charts, I mean, they give you the same information, right?
Right on.
The only way I get JEP charts is at work, so.
Right on. Shall I go ahead and brief the whole plate?
Yeah, so let's say we're going along our route, fat, dumb, and happy, no radio communication failures, no failures or anything like that. We're at this, 45-minute out kind of mark. Let's say we're at Baln right here. And we got the weather, winds 170 at 12. Talk to me about this approach. Brief me this approach as if I'm another pilot in the flight deck, just to, because once you start flying around with other pilots are looking like, hey, is he there? Does he know what's going on? Right. So even if we're not flying as like a crew environment, right, it's still good to brief the other pilots so that they're not looking at you like, is he gonna kill me?
Right on. Yes, so we are looking at the Chattanooga level field RNAV runway 15, June 9th, 2023, page 12.2, effective June 15th. We did get our weather. We are likely on with Chattanooga approach at 125.1. We have an Atlanta center frequency here. If the approach frequency there is enough, we'll put in our tower right now and put our ground frequency in. The RNAV final approach course here will be 150. Sucor is our final approach fix at 3,200. Our minimum descent altitude will be 1,380. Airport elevation 683, touchdown zone elevation 671. Missed approach will be climbing to 3,300, direct IOTA and hold. So now, thinking about what's actually going to happen, we're going to we're coming in from the east, so Lipke might make sense as the initial approach fix. If that's the case, we're gonna go from there on a 240 heading, and we in fact have our highest point pretty close there, 2565. So we got to make sure we certainly wouldn't descend below that, but I'm also looking further down at hexax. I still need to have 4100. So long story short, getting into Lipke 4100 or above on the course of 240 to hexax. I don't need the procedure turn then over there at that point, so I'll make a left turn and get onto my final approach course of 150, start descending to 3500 by 6 and down to 3200 by Sucor. And then I'm gonna start going down to I'm gonna do a straight in landing eventually. Wind is 120, this is runway 15. So I'm gonna look at my straight in landing minimums, which have an MDA of 1380 with 1 statute mile visibility. So basically after Sucor, start descending down. Try and see where my visual approach point here is, because obviously I would want to, the missed approach point is right at the beginning of the threshold. So I don't really want to be at 1380 there and still make the runway, which is almost 700 feet descent. But anyway, so after Sucor, descending down to 1380 and then figuring out my visual approach point here, at which point I would need to have the runway environment inside, and then I'm still able to make a stabilized approach down to it. If I wouldn't at that point, I'll keep that 1380 to the missed approach point, which is runway threshold, and continue going from there, climbing 3300 direct IOTA and hold. Any questions?
All right, so you brought up yeah, a couple. You brought up a visual approach point or visual descent point. I've heard it either way. You brought it up a couple different times, but I see that you noticed that there isn't one charted.
The number one, at least on my chart,
So
confused me here. I don't know if there's a number one circled in there, but I'm reading it now.
the number one circle is, yeah, the number one circle I think you're referring to is the Icing.
Oh,
It might have something to do with circling or something. Straight in approach, not authorized. Yeah. So you brought up the fact. I mean, you noticed that there wasn't any visual descent point or visual approach point, is what you called it. Do you know how to calculate a visual descent point or a visual approach point?
I think I'm blanking on it. Let me try and think real quick. So I know that you can calculate it. I'm guessing, would I try and think about how far out would I need to be in order to make a 500 feet per minute descent and not more than that? So if that's the case, I can start thinking about what is my ground speed, what distance do I actually cover in a minute? And I know, so from 1380 down to the touchdown zone elevation, right around 700 feet. So I need about a minute and a half of my ground speed away from the runway, which, let me think, I'll descend, I'll be maybe a bit above 100 miles per hour. So ground speed, what kind of winds do we have? 12, let's just say 1.5. So 2.25 nautical miles away.
Yeah, I mean that's a decent ballpark. What a lot of people do is they'll calculate a rough 3-degree path, which is take your height above ground at minimums, divide it by 300,
Ah,
and that's going to give you.
that seems easier.
Yeah. I mean, what you did isn't wrong. It was just a lot of math.
So height
And
AGL
I would
divided by
hate to be.
300.
Yep, and that's going to give you your distance in nautical miles from the runway.
Makes sense.
Okay. So we're looking at this one. We're looking at 700 feet AGL or 709. Make it 700 because I'm, divide that by 300, about 2.4. So, I mean, you did the math at about 2.5. So 2.4, 2.5 is a nice VDP. Now, let's say I do see the runway past the VDP point. Am I going to try and make it?
Past the VDP, I
Am I going to
wouldn't.
try and just chop and drop?
Past the VDP, I wouldn't anymore. I mean,
No, right?
0.1 nautical miles past the VDP, maybe could I descend 700 instead of 500, but not any further than that.
Okay. Now, when can I descend below my MDA?
You need a few things. So first one is that you need to have some of the runway environment in sight. You need to be at the prescribed visibilities in flight, and you need to be able to make that stabilized approach. So no crazy maneuvers or crazy descent rates to get there.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, how do you define the runway environment?
Yes, there is a section in the FAR that lists all of them, but as that's not going to be an easy one to just look up in the air of what was it again on the runway. I'm thinking about runway lights, the approach lighting system, clearly a threshold or any sort of markings, anything like that around the runway that I could visually see.
Okay. So we're going into runway 15. Is there an approach lighting system for runway 15?
There is not. We have poppy lights, but that's it.
Okay. Now, let's say I saw the Pappies, but I didn't see any pavement. Can I continue below my MDA?
Let me try and remember what file section it is, because I'm guessing yes, but that would be one I would look up. And let me try and think again. There we go. Runway items 91. Okay. Creating landing operations, cost to IFR, IFR communications. I seem to not be able to find it.
Okay. So the reg is 91,175.
Okay. 91,175.
Yep. And visual glide slope indicators are part of the runway environment. But there's one little caveat in it that I do want to talk about. We see runway 20 right here. We see it has an ALSF2 approach lighting system. Okay. So it means it's got these little lead-in lights, what a lot of people call as rabbits. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see the little depiction up
Yep.
there? If I was doing an approach and I saw just those rabbits, am I allowed to descend below my MDA?
You are, however, not yet below 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation. So the idea is you can descend a bit more. You can't quite land yet, unless if you're staying above 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation, if you then get it.
Yeah, and I mean that happens real quick, kind of thing. You see the rabbits and you drop that other 100 feet. Has your instructor done one of those? Like, hey, you see the rabbits, but stay under the hood, kind of? No.
No.
See if your instructor will do it before your check ride, because
Uh-huh.
you see that the one or two flashing lights, and you're like, okay, I'm going down, and then the runway's right there, and it's right there.
Great call. I'll ask him.
Especially in, a Cherokee 6, it's not a slow moving general aviation plane. As you said earlier, your approach speed's 100 knots or 100 miles an hour. I mean, that's not a slow mover. That's not a slow mover. Most people are doing their instrument rating or their instrument training in like a 172 with an approach speed of like 75.
That was what most people
Okay.
recommended to me, and I went, well, look, if I'm going to fly this plane the whole time, I may as well be used to that pace, right? And however, the one thing my CFI recommended is for the check ride. He said, just expect to ask for delay vectors. Just be ready.
Yes, yes. Do not hesitate to ask for like delay vectors, box vectors, whatnot. Um, awesome. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Let's say we do go missed on the runway 15, the one that you briefed earlier. We
Mhm.
go missed off of runway 15. We didn't see the runway for some reason or another. How are we going to enter this hold?
How are we going to enter, say, which hold?
So it says missed approach,
Yep.
the hold at IOTA. So missed approach, direct IOTA and hold. So what kind of how are we going to enter this hold? There's a couple different types of entries,
Yes,
right?
this one would be a parallel, basically coming right across it. So parallel, or I guess we're even trying to make my part here. I think we're right basically on the part between, do we do teardrop or parallel? But since I'm coming in basically opposite way, I would say I'll go parallel.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that. Remember, it's aim, it's advisory. Just do it safely, right? So it's not like you're not going to get any. If you don't do it safely, obviously you fail. But if you're right on that split, it's really up to you. What speed are we going to hold in this fix or at this hold?
What speed are we gonna hold? So I don't. I'm even in the Cherokee 6. I'm not really up against my potential 200 knot restriction here. I believe that hold is still under 6,000. Yeah, climb to 3,300 direct IOTA. So I'm not up against the 200 knot speed limit. I'll probably hold at about 120 miles an hour, 130 miles an hour. That's about my cruise speed, a little bit less than that.
All right, awesome. I mean, a nice economy cruise, right? You don't know how long you're going to be there. Obviously stay away from stalling, but economy cruise. In the airlines, they try to fly at LD max, right, to reduce the fuel burn as much as possible,
Got it.
right? So you could try and do that. You know, some people get a little uncomfortable flying that slow because the airplane gets a little squishy, right? And the last thing we want to do is loss of control in flight and IMC, right?
Fair.
Um, awesome, awesome. So I'm happy with your. We talked about your route. As I said, I would have filed a little bit more of a, especially for my check ride, I would have filed a little bit more on the routes to a fix.
Yep.
Okay.
This is
Um,
why these mock check rides are awesome. I looked at this after your instruction. I was like, gosh, I actually don't really know. So perfect. Right on. Thank you.
yeah. Um, now let's talk a little bit about an alternate. So we didn't get any real weather for today. Where would I go to try and get some weather?
Number of different options. So when I actually plan across country, I typically do a combination of full flight and actually still calling 1-800 weather brief. But I can also go to aviationweather.gov. Yeah, those are the ones I have in mind.
Awesome. So let's go check out aviationweather.gov and let's look at the weather at Chattanooga today. See, let's just take a look at it, right? Let's go. There we go. So Chattanooga will include the TAF. Should I have an alternate for today?
Um,
Let's say we're going to leave in an hour.
Yes. So I'm thinking about the 1-2-3 rule here. So starting out with, does Chattanooga have a published instrument approach and is it active? Which it looks like it is. So then I'm thinking about for 1 hour before to 1 hour after my expected landing time. Do I have 2,000 2,000 feet ceilings and 3 statute mile visibility? And let's see what that is today. So the TAF Sorry, do you have a specific time we're expected to land?
Let's say that we're leaving. We're going to be leaving our departure, Raleigh Durham RDU, in an hour.
Got it.
So current UTC is 15:16. Departure at 16:16. It's a 2-hour flight. We're expecting an arrival time of 18:16
Got it.
for the roughly 2-hour flight.
And unfortunately, it looks like we will need one. So, but we'll click back to it. So the TAF here for Chattanooga would say that between 1500 Zulu on the 16th today and 1200 Zulu tomorrow, overall, we're looking at variable winds at 5 knots with greater than 6-mile visibility and a broken layer at 1200. There's in that time that we're gonna arrive, so that 18 is in between that 30% probability window, where with a 30% probability, we have 4 statute mile visibility, showery rain, mist, and are broken at 500, overcast at 1,000. So that is certainly below that weather that I would need. And with that said, I do need to pick an alternate here.
Okay, so let's take a look at that weather one more time, but we're going to decode it.
Okay.
You had the altitudes a little. You missed 10. So we're looking at 12,000
gosh,
and
yes.
5,000 and 10,000. Remember,
Very true.
it knocks off 2 zeros.
Yep.
So we've got broken at 5,000, overcast at 10,000.
Then I legally
Well, let's go with the
don't
weather
need
that you
one.
said.
If you let me check, visibility is 4 miles. So in that case, I don't need an alternate.
No, we don't need an alternate. But let's go with the weather that you thought it was, right? 500-foot ceilings, 1,000-foot ceilings. We do need an alternate now. Where would you pick for an alternate?
Yeah, so when I looked around there, let me see, I had a couple in mind. So overall, what I'm trying to look for is probably at least 20, 30 minutes away so that I have some different weather and not something that's right 5 minutes next to it and will most likely have the same weather conditions. So I looked at either Charlie Sierra Victor, which would be to the north, or Delta Zulu Juliet, which would be to the south. And both some about 30 minutes away from it based on maybe where the weather might look better, that I would go down.
Okay. Let's take a look at. So why were you picking Charlie Sierra Victor? So you said it's 30 minutes away. What approaches do we have available? What approaches is your aircraft capable of?
Yeah, so I have a WAAS aircraft, so I can go pretty crazy on GPS approaches. Right, including different alternates. I can do an alternate on a GPS approach too, even if initially I was thinking to do a GPS approach at my initially filed one. With that said, when I look for alternates, so besides make sure it's far enough away, I tend to look at approaches. Are they available there? I look a bit at services too. Is there an FBO there? Is there fuel there? Might I get a rental car there to just do the drive to Chattanooga from there? And I think, yeah, that's what it would look like. The approaches on the one hand, and then kind of services on the other hand. And of course, runway length. Our club doesn't allow us to touch down on grass, so it would have to be asphalt or something like that.
I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find an instrument approach to grass. Anyway,
I guess that's a fair point. See, I have no experience with grass, so I'm guessing that's a very fair point, but I would have no idea.
yeah. I mean, if you get the opportunity, get the opportunity to go fly around on some grass. It is harder on planes. I won't say that it's just like asphalt. It is tougher on planes. There's holes and there's ruts and it's bumpy, and especially on like a Cherokee 6 with collapsible gear or retractable gear. not collapsible gear.
That would be funny.
With retractable gear.
Yeah,
You know, it
actually, I
can be a
did
little
it
bit
once
harder on it. The prop is
with
low.
my tailwheel instructor, and that was exactly my thought. My thought was I'd rather touch down on grass the first time when it's not an emergency, and not have my first emergency landing also be my first grass landing. So he was okay taking his plane to a grass trip, and we did like 10 approaches on it or something. It was less bumpy than I thought, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, it really depends on the suspension of the airplane, right? When you a Mooney on grass is rough because their entire suspension is really just some pivot points and some squishy rubber. They have no real shocks on a Mooney. It's just some rubber discs that collapse and that squish up. But you know, I think the Cherokee 6 doesn't it have? I mean, it has shocks,
Oleo
right?
struts, actually, if I'm as a non-English native, if I'm pronouncing that first one correctly, but like an oil nitrogen mix in the struts that compresses.
Y- Yep, and that's gonna absorb some of the bumps of a grass strip a little easier than like a Mooney would. But as we're back on alternates, let's take a look at this approach. What does this little A mean right here?
Then I have alternative minimums.
Okay, so non-standard IFR alternate minimums exist. So let's say
And sorry,
the
this is
the the weather.
this
Well,
is the UNF 8, is that right? Or
yep, RNAV GPS runway 8 into CSV.
got it.
All right. So we're saying that this is our alternate CSV. We got alternate minimums right here. It's a little more difficult for me to find it
Mm-hmm.
on my end. So let's just control CSV. There it is. So if we're going to be doing the RNAV GPS runway 8 or 26, it really just says not authorized when local weather is not available.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So we recognize that when we see those little A's, especially in relation to our alternates, we do have to go find some more information. Now, let's say that I saw, I don't know, it didn't just say A, it said A and A.
Then it would be not authorized as an alternate.
That's exactly what it would say. It would be not authorized as an alternate. What I like to do when I'm planning for an IFR route, especially if I'm going somewhere I don't know, I write in the conditions associated with this A on the plate so that I don't have to go look it up, right? Because you can scribble on your plates on your iPad. You just write, A, this thing is in reference saying, hey, if I can't get the weather, not authorized if weather's not available.
That's a good call. I
Right.
need to get a little better because
Um,
I've used the scribbles on my iPads basically for haven't completed an item yet. So I like to like clear all my annotations out when I'm actually getting to my initial approach fix. But it's this idea of, oh, I haven't been able to tune an ID to localizer yet. Let me circle that. Or I haven't gotten the weather yet. Let me circle this or that. And then I have that tendency of let me clear all annotations before I actually get to my initial approach fix to make sure I got all these items in. But I'll think about that. That's a good call to think about, maybe different color schemes or something like that. Starting to scribble some of these pertinent information in there.
Yeah, and I mean that's really not a bad idea. The way that you're handling it is you're using it as almost like an impromptu checklist,
Yep.
right? Um, awesome. Let's get out of let's just go here. Let's start talking about really the equipment that gets installed in your airplane. So you said you've got two G5s in your aircraft. Let's say you go out to your airplane and your old mechanical altimeter isn't functioning. Is this airplane airworthy or legal to take into IFR conditions?
My old school altimeter is not working anymore. So um, going IFR, I'll need to have the grab card items, which have an altimeter that's barrel adjustable as one of the items. I think my initial thought is I do still have one on the G5 and I can adjust the pressure on it. So I guess legally I could. Well, I would be pretty hesitant.
Okay. So this is where we kind of get back to private pilot stuff and truly understand, like, what is it? What is 91213 and 91205 actually telling me, right? Because 91205, we all remember the A tomato flames and flaps, but none of us actually go and read the regulation to read what it actually says, right? Like, let's just be honest with
Yep.
ourselves. None of us have actually read that. We just trust our instructor isn't trying to screw us over. But what 91205 tells you, or 91213 and 91205 tells you, is one of the things it brings up is you need to check either your kinds of equipment list or even STCs, what's required by an STC or a supplemental type certificate. So was your airplane originally designed and built with G5s in mind?
It was not. Definitely
No.
not.
So if we look at the STC for the G5, the STC for the G5 actually requires the old altimeter and airspeed indicator because the G5s cannot be primary pitot-static information for any flight.
Ah, that's awesome to know.
Right? And I know that that's a little bit more to dig into, but you're the pilot in command. You're the one that decides on whether or not the aircraft is legal, safe, and whatnot. Sure, there are some certified airplanes out there that have gotten field approvals from the FAA to operate with just two G5s and no standby instrument, no standby pitot-static information. Yes, there are rare airplanes where the FAA was like, yeah, sure, why not? Here you go. But the STC associated with Garmin and how they were approved to be installed without an FAA field approval was with the primary pitot-static information being presented on your old school airspeed and altimeter.
Got it. Really interesting. Makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So given that your altimeter, your old school altimeter is actually required, let's talk about it. How does it function? Can you kind of break it down for me, Barney style, how that altimeter actually works?
Yeah, sure. So altimeter gets info from our pitot-static system and ultimately compares an air pressure between what I adjust in the barrel as my ground pressure to what it feels in the air from the static port. So it basically compares, and it might know that on the ground I was at 30.20, and now it has a specific pressure up there, and it translates that through its instrument onto what the actual feed above sea level would be.
All right, awesome. Now, let's say we're flying along fat, dumb, and happy, and we're just terrible at our job and we never reset our altimeter. So we took off from an area of 3020, right? And now we're about to do an approach, and we didn't listen to the ATIS because we're a terrible instrument pilot, but the altimeter setting here is actually 2990.
So pretty far off.
Am
Yep.
I Yeah. What might happen?
Let me make sure I don't confuse whether higher or lower. So if I typically, when I adjust my barrel, if I turn the number down, my altimeter goes down too. So now I should be at a lower number, but I basically turned it up incorrectly. So it would tell me that I'm higher than I actually am.
Okay. So what's the risk with that when, let's say, we're doing a LNAV approach, right? We're doing an approach that's only offering us lateral navigation. What am I risking if I'm going to be low? And how low might I be if I went from 3020 to 2990?
It's really about hitting the ground eventually is the risk. How far down? That's a good question. So I have a 0.3 difference. What would that be in feet? Frankly, I don't know how to do that calculation or think about it.
It's about 10 feet for every point.
10 feet for every point. Got it. So
Yep.
we
So that
are.
0.3, you're going to be about 30 feet low.
Got it.
And if you're doing, let's say, an ILS, right? An ILS is going to take, or an LPV approach, that's going to take you to roughly 200 feet off the ground, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, we're now 170 feet off the ground. Was there an obstacle, what have you, that we should have seen, right? So we need to make sure, obviously, set your altimeter. Now, Let's talk about your airspeed indicator. How does the airspeed indicator function?
So that's the one instrument that actually uses the pitot tube. And what you get into the pitot tube is ram air, and it compares it to the static air, basically, or I guess truly mathematically, you have ram air and static air coming out of the pitot side, and the drain hole has the static one. So if those two clear out, it basically translate the ram air into speed.
Okay, so where is the static port? I hate to, yeah. Where's the static port giving information to in this airspeed indicator? Because we've got like a little balloon inside the airspeed indicator that expands and contracts, right?
Mhm.
So where's the static port actually getting felt? Where's the static port plumbed into in this airspeed indicator?
And if that makes sense, I would say on the back side, like not the part where the ram air comes in, but on the other side of the balloon.
Yeah, so it's going to be on the outside of the balloon, right? So we'll just open up Microsoft Paint just to make sure, draw a couple pictures, make sure we're kind of on the same page. We'll go with, a brush works. I always forget how to make the dang thing wider.
It's funny. I tell people the only thing I
Oh, it's right
regret
over there.
ever switching from PC to Apple is that I don't have Microsoft Paint anymore. I love that program.
I think Apple, where did my dang mouse go? There it is. You got 5 different screens struggling to keep track of your mouses. So, airspeed indicator, right? We've got a box. Inside of it, we've got a balloon. And to the case, we have the static port. That's really how they function. So we'll just draw a little circle over here. I'm still on the eraser. Little circle over here. Here's our static port, and then we'll use a blue one for our pitot tube. All right, so pitot tube is going to come into the instrument, into the back, and it's going to feed into the little balloon. So the balloon expands and contracts with the ram air pressure. And then the static port is going to go to the case as almost like a reference.
Makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. And kind of the reason behind this is like, let's pretend that this was blocked up. Now we've locked in, let's say 2992 inside the instrument case. So now once we get to altitude, the density of air going into the pitot tube is going to be going down. Since the density of air going into the pitot tube is going down, the density of air actually getting in here and trying to push out on this balloon is going down, but the density inside the case stayed the same. So now you've got less mass pushing against a relatively higher mass, so it won't indicate as much. Pretty much what it's saying is if your static port gets plugged, let's say somehow your static port gets plugged like right here, like something broke off from inside one of your other instruments or something or another, some Teflon tape got stuck here. Your airspeed indicator is what it's going to look like to you is you're going to lose all climb performance because you're going to be at full power, not climbing because you're trying to climb at a specific indicated airspeed, right? But in reality, your true airspeed or the actual airspeed you're going to be flying is going to be substantially higher. It's just not indicating to you because you've got this static port blockage.
That makes sense. Yep. Makes sense.
Awesome. Now, let's talk about what do you, so I know you've got the GPS. Do you have any other ground-based navigation equipment in this aircraft?
I do have a VOR receiver. I don't have DME.
Okay. Well, talk to me about how VORs work then.
Yeah, so VOR, station on the ground, right, stands for very high frequency omnidirectional. I should remember for my Checkride to keep my mouth shut and not answer things I'm not asked because I'm blanking on the R. Very high frequency
Range.
There we go. So imagine it kind of a circle on the ground that basically sends out radials in 360 degrees. that you can tune into and follow.
Awesome. Now, what are some of the limitations associated with a VOR?
Big one is that it's line of sight. So if I couldn't see that VOR because of a mountain, something in between, I also can actually get those radials. Another one is its slant range. I guess that's maybe more important for the DME side of it, but it also creates that cone of confusion when I'm right over it or very close to it.
Okay, what can you kind of describe to me what cone of confusion means from like the cockpit? Like if I was not a pilot sitting in the other seat and I saw the symptoms of the cone of confusion, what would it be?
Um, so it would track the distance from the VOR incorrectly, because if I'm 10,000 feet above it, it might think I'm a couple miles away from it, even though I might be exactly above it.
Okay, so what you're referring to is slant range in relation to DME. Remember, we can have a VOR without DME. VORs and DMEs aren't necessarily always put at the same place. I mean, most a DME without a VOR or without some other kind of lateral navigation is kind of useless. But sometimes VORs are associated, or DMEs are associated with ILSs, localizers, etc. So the cone of confusion is really when you're right on top of the VOR, or you're really close to the VOR, and the needle gets really sensitive and starts swinging back and forth, or even you end up with the to from flip, flipping back and forth.
That makes sense.
Okay. Um, Now, the last limitation of a VOR is the cone of confusion. What is, or not the cone of confusion, reverse sensing, reverse sensing. What is reverse sensing?
It's a great question. I've heard that word before. um, I'm not sure.
Okay. So let's go back to Sky Vector real quick, so that we can use a VOR as an example. Um, how are your VORs presented? Like, do they come up on your G5?
Uh,
The information from the VOR, it shows up as a green needle on your
yes.
G5? Okay. That's probably why you've never really seen cone of confusion, because the G5 does a really good job of, or not cone of confusion, reverse sensing, because the G5 does a really good job of getting rid of it. But let's say we are trying to go to the Shell. What is this one? Shelbyville.
hmm
Yeah. No, not the Shelbyville. Oh yeah, Shelbyville. There it is. There's a little thing. The Shelbyville VOR. So we are at Atlas, and we're trying to go to the Shelbyville VOR. So what radial would I tune in? What radial would I put in the top of my what course would I put in at the top of my G5?
Yep. So 13, basically the inverse of the 193 that's coming out of it.
Okay, now what would happen if I put the 193 in?
Then I
Reverse
would
sensing.
I would still basically be on the right track if I follow that radial, but it would be a from indication rather than a to.
Yes, but that is what the G5 is doing. The G5 is fixing the reverse sensing.
And so reverse
Okay.
sensing is basically taking the inverse course with a different to from.
So reverse sensing is, let's say I'm trying to go to a VOR, but I tune in a course that would take me away from it, and the needle will behave backwards. So the needle is showing me where the aircraft is in relation to the course, as opposed to showing me where the course is in relation to the aircraft.
That makes sense. Yep, of course, that makes
That's
sense. So
reverse sensing.
I might think I have to turn left when really I should turn right to stay on the radial. That makes sense.
Yep. So just to kind of let's do that. So reverse sensing, just to be sure, right? So we've got a little VOR. Oh, brush. We've got a little VOR up here. We've got a track. We've got a course that we want to go inbound. Let's say that this is the 180 radial. going outbound right now. This radial right here is 180, and we've got our fun little airplane, you know, bumming along, fat, dumb, and happy. But I want to go to the VOR, but I see 180 on my chart, so I tune in 180, and I turned right anyway because I know if I'm going, I know the VOR is north of me for some reason. But what's going to happen is the needle is going to start showing me where the aircraft where the aircraft is in relation to the course. So the course is right here in the middle, and this is showing me where the aircraft is.
That makes sense.
Now,
As
if I
opposed
saw a
to which
CDI
way I
like
should
this,
turn. Yeah.
yep. So if I saw a CDI looking like this, which way do you think I should turn?
Well, I would usually think
Let me
right,
draw it.
but since it's reverse sensing now, it would be left.
Exactly. But we don't want to reverse sense. Reverse sensing is something that we don't want to happen.
Makes sense.
The G5s do a really good job of getting rid of it, which means like that's how a lot of people do lose their situational awareness in IFR. They go and do all their training in an airplane that's fancier than they could ever afford, and then they go buy an airplane they could actually afford that doesn't have, you know, nice fancy Garmin avionics, and they're like, oh well, I've got an instrument rating, so then they go and hop into it with their swinging needles and VORs and whatnot, as opposed to just following the magenta line direct to destination.
I feel like that always sounds like a great idea, going onto a new plane or going to new avionics without a CFI the first time, or somebody who really knows what they're doing. But yeah, might not seem like a
Yeah.
great idea.
No, but it happens. I mean, I have buddies that they make more money than I do, but they still refuse to buy an airplane because they can't afford something with nice avionics because they did all their training in nice avionics.
Yeah. There's another good
Awesome.
rant of that instructor from the ground school. He went on to these people that buy the Cirrus Vision jet, right, and go, all right, let me fly my family to Europe. And he went, if you have that money, why don't you pay another 2,000 and put a person to the right of you for that flight, right? Like,
Yeah. Believe me, yeah, more money than sense. They're like, the parachute's going to save me if anything goes wrong.
it might.
Yeah, it might. Let's talk about your GPS for a bit. So you've got that Garmin 430, which means it's WAAS capable, correct?
Yes.
What is WAAS?
WAAS is a way basically to make GPS location more accurate by adding ground stations that satellites would radio down to. Of course, the ground station knows exactly where it is. So if it sees that GPS is a little bit next to it, it would send a signal back up to the satellites with a not a variation, but a correction, basically, that then I receive as WAS to just have that GPS location be a lot more accurate.
Okay. The only kind of part that I would correct is just that the the ground stations, right? They receive the data, right? They receive information from satellites and they go, that one's a little cattywampus. So they send that data off to a master station. Okay. The master station is where the corrections are actually being applied. And then the master station beams that up to what's called a geostationary satellite, or a satellite that stays up, that's pretty much it's orbiting at the same rate at which the planet rotates. So it's always above the same spot on the Earth.
Got it.
Those geostationary satellites then send your aircraft the correction.
Makes sense. Yep.
Right. So we did have to add a couple more pieces of equipment to the equation to actually get WAAS. How do you know that your aircraft is currently receiving WAAS signals?
I believe there is, in fact, opposite. I think there is an indication if it's not receiving WAS. I'm frankly
So when
blanking
you
on what that
load
looks
a
like.
WAAS approach, what does it show you on your G5?
And I'm loading.
Shows you a purple line,
Yeah.
right? What does it say next to that purple line? Usually to the right, slightly lower. Tells you what kind of approach you're doing. right? I'll go find a picture just to make sure we're on the same page.
I'm trying to think too. We're not talking about for localizer if I would switch to CDI, right? At some
G5 doing an approach, images. Yeah, that's not a bad picture. Open image, new tab. You see this right here?
Oh yes, LPV. Yep.
LPV. That's how I know I have WAAS. It's telling me LPV.
That makes sense.
If I didn't have WAAS, what do you think it would say? Probably LNAV.
Yep.
The aircraft is going to tell me the limits. It's going to warn me. It's going to inform me of its current accuracy. Right? Because when I use my GPS on those G5s, what does it say when I'm en route? It says en route. When I'm in the terminal area, it tells me terminal. When I'm on the approach, it tells me the limits of the approach that I'm doing.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, right on. Awesome.
Okay. You know where all of that information, it's in the supplement that's required to be in the aircraft for the G5.
I think that's one thing I'm taking away from today. Like starting at the STCs you talked about earlier, is I need to read that G5 supplement, and I should have already read it.
It's kind of hilarious the amount of people that they'll go and drop 40 grand on avionics and then not read the instruction manual.
I feel like we're so used to it with all the other things we ever do, right? Like who reads an instruction manual for a microwave or your laundry machine? Is you just start clicking, right? And yep, maybe not a good idea to do that.
The only difference is yeah. That's the only difference. Exactly. Because like your iPhone, right? Your phone, you boot it up and it's like, look at all the things your phone can do. I literally will not let you use this device until you let me show you how to use this damn thing. Garmin's like, go read the manual. Don't fly and figure it out. Go read the manual. Oh, you didn't? Not our problem. We told you not to do that.
There you go.
It's do not try to learn your avionics en route.
It's a very good call. Yes.
Plug the aircraft into a ground charger and fiddle with the airplane on the ground, look through the manual, load the approaches. Garmin offers so many free tools as well to play with their avionics like on your computer.
Well, that's a really good call too. Yeah. Yep.
So I'm more talking for the people that are watching this video. Don't learn how to use your avionics in flight. Okay? Especially if it's Garmin. They're offering you the tools to do it for free on the ground. Well, so far, it seems like maybe we needed to crack open the FAR aim, dig into 91.175 when we can actually descend below. 91.185 for the lost comms stuff to really go over like, hey, what do I actually do once I reach the end of my clearance?
Yep.
Holding seemed fine. Understanding of the equipment that's in your airplane, really just go read the manual.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of where I'm at. The G5, knowing on whether or not your old school altimeter is required, that's a very easy gotcha for dang near any DPE. But remember, you're the pilot in command. You're the one that has to ensure that this aircraft is airworthy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
When I installed my G5s with my mechanic, I was like, why am I putting my old school airspeed and altimeter back in here? These are stupid. Why do I want these? And then you read through the manual like, oh crap. Because it makes my airplane airworthy, right? Reading the chart seemed all right. I would definitely just go dig through the en route chart of some more. Seems like you're pretty well versed in your JEP charts. I'm happy with that. The one thing that we did not talk about is departures and arrivals. Now, I know you've probably never done an arrival, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's go talk about one, because just because you've never done one doesn't mean you won't ever get assigned one.
Right on.
Right?
I was going to say, I've actually only ever done one sit to RDU tends to not do too many sits, at least in my experience on my planes.
Well, yeah, because they're more meant for the higher volume traffic and stuff like that. So what I'm gonna say is let's go to CLT, so Charlie Lima Tango, and let's look at the Banker 5. If you want to pull that up on your end, just so we're
Yep.
kind of on the same page.
The
Banker 5.
Anchor 5 RNF. Got it.
All right, so we're looking at this arrival. We look at the notes immediately. Can we do this arrival?
So let me see here. Radar required, jet aircraft only. That would tell me we can't.
No, so we can't do this arrival. Awesome. So if ATC was like, hey, expect the Banker 5, what would we say?
Unable.
Unable, landing in the Hudson. No, I'm kidding. Unable. But let's pretend that we're capable of doing this arrival. Let's say the clearance that we got was direct Ponzi for the Banker 5, descend via the Banker 5.
Got it.
What altitude would I try to go to Ponzi at?
Flight level 270.
All right, and what airspeed would I be at?
280 knots.
Okay, so just work me through the fixes just to make sure that I know we know how to read an arrival.
Sure. So from
Let's say we're landing on runway 18.
runway 18.
Yep.
So let me just look at that box here real quick. Landing from depth. Where's depth? Over there. Okay. So Ponzi is set starting at flight level 270, 280 knots. I'm going on a 027 degree course to Networth. Descend to flight level 240 by then. Reduce speed to 270 knots. Then continue on a 029 heading to King. Then on a 038 to Credette. Descend down to 17,000 feet. Continue from there to Banker at 270 knots between 13,000 and flight level 220. Let me just see what comes afterwards. 12. So 17,000 at Cardette. So I'll probably continue to descend to that 13,000. Now, I do believe that turn there, that hold confuses me a little bit.
So that hold really is just like if we could get the clearance we might get for this hold would be descend via the Banker, but hold at Banker as published.
Got it.
We didn't get that.
Got it. Makes
right? We
sense.
just said descend via the Banker.
Cool. So then we'll continue from Banker to depth, which is a 040 heading, descend down to 12,000, make sure we're 250 knots, and then I'll follow the box down here that says from depth on track 040 to cross Rober, which is up there between 12,000 and 16,000. Then on track 050 to cross Fobar, up there between 12 and 14. Then on track 050 to cross Deals at 12,000 and at 250 knots. Then on track 050 ST Cup. Then on track 003.
Stick up.
Stick up. There you go. Then
Yep.
on track 003 to Dosby. Continue on the 003 to Airy. And on track 003 to Jordan. Expect radar vectors to final approach course.
Awesome. I'm happy with that. Let's go take a look at a departure procedures. I'll just grab let's look at the Barmy 5. Rotate rotate it so I don't have to. Yeah, wrong button. Is this a SID or an ODP?
This is a SID.
Awesome. I'm happy with that. What's the big difference between a SID and ODP?
So ODP really just gives me reliable obstruction clearance, while I would question the radio, radar, nav reception.
Well, how do I verify? So an ODP is going to give you a route that's going to, ensure that you can actually take off and fly and maintain clearance from obstructions. You can't really do that if you can't maintain nav coverage, right?
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I want to do, actually, there's an ODP over in Salt Lake that I want to kind of talk about. So it's SLC if you want to go there.
And then so it does still, so an ODP like a SID would also still give me nav coverage. What is the difference then? Is that a SID gets me better onto the eventual route and into a transition?
So a SID is really just for route control and ease of use.
Okay. Okay.
Or right, an ODP only cares about obstacle clearance. So you might be sitting here going, it would be more efficient for me to go that way. Why are they sending me north when I'm trying to go south?
That makes sense. Got it. Got it.
It's because there's mountains down there. Okay. This isn't. Is this a departure that I'm looking for? No, I don't think so. It might be the Salt Lake 4. Yeah, so let's go take a look at the Salt Lake 4 departure out of Salt Lake City. And what I want to ask you is your aircraft capable of taking off of runway 16 and completing this departure procedure?
All right, let's
16 right.
see. 16 right.
Oh, it would help if I did this.
Climb heading 163 or if assigned, maintain 10,000 was assigned on what to do. 16 right, assigned heading 163, standard or lower than standard with minimum climb of 260 per nautical mile to 6,000. That still sounds doable. I'll do the math in a second to make sure that it really is, but it keeps going. Assigned heading with minimum climb of 400 per nautical mile to 8,300. So that would likely be my breaking point, and what I should calculate is between 6 and 8,300, could I climb 400 feet per nautical mile? So I am at probably pretty close to a 90 knot ground speed in calm winds. If that was my ground speed, then to do 400 feet per nautical mile, I would need to climb 600 feet per minute. That's potentially doable, potentially tight in the 6, I would say between 6 and 8, heavily depending on density altitude probably. So if it's somewhat warm, I probably can't do it anymore. If it's really cool, nice day, good climb performance, I might be able to just about do it.
Okay, let's go look at, let's say that we're going to be departing like right now out of Salt Lake City. And this is the clearance we got. So clearance was like, hey, climb out via the, we picked up our craft clearance, depart via the Salt Lake 4. And we responded, stand by, I need to check my numbers. So currently it is 18 degrees in Salt Lake City. Are we capable of maintaining that 600 foot per, you said 600 foot per nautical mile out of there, right?
400 foot per nautical mile,
or not 600 foot
600 feet per minute.
So Where could I look? Where could I do this math?
In my POH.
All right, let's go track down the POH. I know I downloaded it around here somewhere. Is this it? There it is. So we got the POH for the Cherokee 6 right here. Let's go see if we can find a climb rate.
It should
Oh, it's a
be.
real short POH.
Yep.
So
Should be in the performance section, right? All performance is given for a weight of 3,400 pounds. Huh.
Yeah, there's not much.
Nope.
So what I would definitely recommend, given that your airplane doesn't really give you any information, I always love it when these POHs are like, yeah, just wing it. You're good. Come on. I would definitely try to build your own kind of performance chart, right? Take notes.
Makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Just take some notes while you're out flying around. Like, I know hot days, my airplane's going to do 500 feet per minute. I know cold days, my airplane's going to do 800 feet per minute. Okay. And it's going to do it up to about 6,000 feet on average. But once I hit about 6,000 feet, I know the most I'm going to do is 500 feet per minute. I'm probably going to be doing closer to 300 to 400 feet per minute. Okay. So these are kind of the numbers I've got in the back of my head, as opposed to just like, maybe.
Right on. Yeah. Yep. It's good to know the exact limit. Yep.
So yeah, if you're looking like a brand new Cessna POH, it's like at 6,000 feet, you're going to do 422 feet per minute or whatever. All right. Now, I'm pretty happy on where you're at, other than the things that we did talk about. Do you have any specific questions that you really want to? Oh, yeah, we got to talk about weather. I mean, weather's pretty straightforward. You're a private pilot. The only real difference now is now you're going to be flying in the weather. So let's go look at a prog chart. And before we really dig into what any of these symbols mean or anything like this, what would drive you to go look at a prog chart?
Prop chart I would look at probably further out in terms of time, like maybe a couple days, a few days to a flight that is likely not just local, but I'm going to try and figure out a little bit of a bigger picture of what is that weather going to do on that day.
Yeah, that's about it. Is what is the weather going to do in the future? Big picture. Really just planning, right? So if I am, let's say, going from up here, North Dakota, and I'm going to be flying down to Texas, I see this low pressure right here. You see that?
Yep.
Which side of this low pressure would give me better tailwinds?
Yep. So high pressure goes outwards, low pressure goes in and this way. So the left side, the west side of the low pressure.
Yep, west side of the low pressure. Now, just because I'm going to get better tailwinds, just based on what you're looking at on this prog chart, would you say that the west side of this low pressure would be the better place to go through?
Nah, it looks like I'm kind of going through a front over there. That I probably wouldn't love to do in real life. I would prefer the east side.
Yeah. So sometimes, sacrifice a little bit of tailwind. How do you define freezing or icing conditions?
So icing conditions, I'm gonna have at or below at or around the freezing point. So I being European originally, I still tend to think about it in Celsius. And, I would say right up to probably about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. So would likely be like 36, 37, maybe even 38 degrees. I might just say under 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to be somewhat cautious. So need some temperatures below at or right around the freezing point, and I need visible moisture. Those are the two that will give me icing.
Okay. Now, let's say we're flying around it and it is just blisteringly cold. Let's say it's negative 15 degrees Celsius. Um, and we're flying through what looks like might be a little bit of haze, a little bit of clouds. What kind of ice might you expect to appear in these kind of weather conditions?
Clear ice, really, at that. at that low of a temperature.
So clear ice isn't necessarily just about temperature. It's also about the conditions that we're flying in. Clear ice is going to happen more when your wing is below freezing, but the water itself is either super cooled or is just about freezing.
That
So
makes
when the
sense.
water hits, the large water droplets it hits, slides back and freezes. But if we're flying through like these misty conditions and blistering cold, right? The ice is going to start building up on the front of the airplane as soon as it hits.
That makes
Which
sense.
would be
So
called what kind of ice?
rime ice, in fact. Yep. That makes sense. Got it.
Yep. Have you ever driven through freezing fog?
I don't think I have. No. Mm-mm.
No? Oh, we'll just Google images. Freezing fog. Images. Freezing fog. Car. So, freezing fog, as you're driving along, it hits the car and it starts to build up, right? That's rime ice.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go back here. All right. Is there anything you really wanted to dig into more? Because I mean, those are the two big items when it comes to IFR. Because now you're going farther, so we need to really be paying attention to the prog and icing conditions. We really need to be paying attention. Hey, are we going to end up in freezing conditions? Is your airplane certified for flight in known icing?
No, it's not. Doesn't have any sort of de-icing equipment.
Does the FAA define known icing conditions?
Don't know. They don't?
No, they don't. No, there is no definition of known icing conditions. It's just, is it conducive to ice accumulation?
Makes sense.
Great. That's helpful enough to get me in trouble. So setting your own limits on where you think icing might occur is really where you're at, and that's what you did. Have I flown in weather that I look outside and I go, there should be ice on the airplane right now, and there is not ice on the airplane? Yes, and it's scary. It's concerning, right? I know when I was flying back from Sun and Fun, my outside air temperature was showing -2, and I was in the rain, in the clouds, no ice forming on the airplane at all. The only thing that I could say was that it was like a lower wet bulb temperature, some like wicking action going on the outside air temperature probe that was causing it to read lower than actual temperature.
Huh. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's funny. On my personal
No, I'm not
minimums,
saying
my
push
last
it.
bullet point is no tolerance for any icing. That seems. I feel like thunderstorms and icing. I just don't need. I'd much rather take the car.
Yeah, yeah. I am right there with you. I've gotten icing one time in general aviation, and no, it's not. I'm good. I never want to do that again. And it was in Arizona of all places.
Wild.
Yeah. So I would say really just dig into the sectional a little bit more of the chart.
Yep.
You seem comfortable with your JEP charts. Crack open the regs when associated with the 91.175, 91.183, and skim through the AIM. I'm trying to remember what chapter that is. I think it's chapter 5 in the AIM that just covers all of the nav sources.
Makes sense. Yep. Yep, that makes sense. And then
maybe it's chapter 1.
And then systems definitely makes sense. Read through the manuals. I jotted down a few quicker questions up front, if I can fire them at you, and maybe have
go
a
ahead.
longer or shorter one too. I was debating yesterday, do I need to memorize Aeromedical flames and flaps? In fact, prepping for yesterday, I think my thing was, okay, I'm either going to learn Marvelous VFR C500 or I'm going to relearn Aeromedical flames and flaps. And I figured the former is the better one to know while you're in air when you need to report. But I'm curious if you have experience with a DPE. Is it fair enough if I say, let me look in 91.205, and I can't remember anymore what A tomato flames is off the top?
To be honest, I look it up. I look up 91.205 and 91.213 because if you get to the commercial level, you're going to be flying around with an MEL anyway, and you're not going to memorize your MEL. You're not going to memorize the minimum equipment list. What they might dig more into is where are we looking as opposed to A tomato flames and flaps, because your airplane is a perfect example of how A tomato flames and flaps and grab card and all that doesn't matter, right? It's a perfect example of like, hey, look, I can rattle and prattle off all this information, but if I don't understand that I need to actually check my STCs, my install manuals, my aircraft manuals, A tomato flames doesn't provide me any information that's actually important. Marvelous VFR C500 though, when you need to make a mandatory report, that's pretty important because usually those mandatory reports are associated with lack of radar coverage. An ATC probably has no idea where you are.
That makes sense.
So, if I was doing a mock check ride, or even if I was at, UND still doing stage checks, and a student was like, hey, I got to look up grab card. I'm like, all right, let's look it up. Let's look it up together, right? The airplane has a piece of broken equipment. Let's look it up. But if we're out flying along and I'm like, hey, ATC says, if we're out doing the actual flight portion and I'm pretending to be ATC and I say like, hey, Cessna 123, I've lost radar coverage. Can you make your reporting points? And then they make none of them. That's a problem.
That makes sense. Yep. Right on.
All right. And that's how I would actually develop that situation or develop that scenario, is I would pretend something in the airplane was broken if the student couldn't respond with memorizing grab card.
Right on. That makes sense. The other one, maybe I can save this because I had another question in Aeromedical. Like, should I remember ice flags? Should I not? But maybe if you don't mind, let's go on Aeromedical for a few minutes, and I'm curious what you might ask and what might be good enough.
When it comes to Aeromedical, I'm a little bit more concerned about, especially in IFR, is the
oxygen requirements or something like that, or
situational awareness. Not well, maybe for your airplane, given the altitude availability of it, but not spatial disorientation. I was looking through my notes trying to find it. Spatial disorientation. So, I'd be a little bit more concerned about the leans. So, kind of describe to me what the leans are and how do we get to the leans.
So let me try and not confuse those right now with elevator. I believe leans is this feeling of tumbling backward after a climb and level out.
So that is going to be that elevator illusion, or that one is even like on swift power applications.
Got it.
Okay. It happens on go-arounds or missed approaches. That one happens on missed approaches. Often, you cram the power, especially for you, 350 scoochums. That's a decent amount of power, and you're going to pick up speed real quick. And now you start climbing, you punch into the soup, all that power, all that climb. It's very easy for you to end up with that elevator or tumbling backward illusion, right? The leans is more ATC says, hey, Cherokee 123, make a left, can you make a left turn for me to a heading 090? Can you continue that left turn 180? Keep bringing that turn around heading 270. You know what? Make it all the way around to 360. Can you keep going around to 090? You know what? Level out on a heading of, 170. And now, since you spend all this time turning and turning and turning and turning and turning, when you go to level out, your body's thinking that you're still in the turn because while you were turning, the fluid inside your ears eventually evened out.
That makes sense.
Now that you come back, your body's now under the impression that now you're turning again. And people who don't read their instruments assume like, hey, my attitude indicator failed. So now they're flying around cattywampus like this. Well, what happens when I fly around cattywampus like this? It's a struggle for me to maintain altitude. So I pitch. and now I've started turning. What am I getting
A
into?
graveyard spiral.
A graveyard spiral.
Yep.
That's really why I dig in. That's really what I'm more concerned about is does the student understand how leans can happen and how does it lead to a graveyard spiral?
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. Very cool.
So visual illusions, some of the visual illusions when it comes to IFRs, things like VFR on top,
hmm
right? We punch through the clouds. There's a slanting layer. A lot of people can confuse that for
False
the horizon. They
horizon.
try to level out on the false
Yeah,
horizon.
makes sense.
Awesome. Now, any other? I mean, there's oxygen requirements. When are you required to? When are the passengers required to be provided oxygen?
They would be above 14,000 feet.
Okay. Now, when is the crew required to wear oxygen?
I'm debating if I'm taking my previous answer back and going to 15,000. We try to think on the upward way. So 12,500. If I'm more than 30 minutes above that, I need to have oxygen for the crew. And then 14,000, I believe, crew needs to be on oxygen, and then would be 15,000 for passengers.
So, if I remember correctly, the passengers need to be provided oxygen at 14.
At 14, okay.
Just below 14.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. So they're the same altitudes.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yep.
Awesome. Now, I mean, medicals, they're kind of changing right now, with Mosaic coming out and everything. So I don't think anybody's going to be too heavy on it because, like, once Mosaic comes out in your airplane, do you even need a medical?
I believe not. Under 250
What's
knots.
the clean stall speed?
This is the clean stall speed. Actually, I might be above. The Mosaic is 69? Is that right?
61.
61. I believe I'm at 69,
61, 60.
if I'm not mistaken. That's a number I should know.
Okay, so Cherokee 6 is not. So the Cherokee 6 is not part of Mosaic for those of you wanting the Cherokee 6 and not a medical. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Aeromedical, you've been a pilot for a while. At this point, I don't want to say there's an assumption that you understand how to ensure that you're safe. I would focus more on the illusions associated with IFR flight.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because even thousands of hours of IFR flying, there are still times where I'm like, am I straight? Like, you get the feeling.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
You get the, I'm crooked, but then you look at your attitude indicator, you're like, I'm not crooked. Okay. So those are going to live with you for the rest of your life. Some people are more impacted by it than others. Some people, it gets worse in age. As their vision goes, stuff like that. They start wearing glasses. Now their peripheral vision is a little worse. So they start losing that spatial orientation. But those are going to be the more important, at least in my opinion. The spatial orientation factors are going to be more important than do you know when you need to go get your medical?
Yep. Makes a ton of sense. Very cool. Awesome. That gives me some good areas to restudy, make sure I remember the oxygen levels correctly. Right on. I was going to say in the last couple of minutes, maybe if I still may, this is one of the first times I'm actually talking to a seaplane pilot. So figured I should make use of that.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, I've always kind of thought about it. I've heard from people, North Carolina is not very friendly to seaplane pilots because a lot of the lakes, I believe, are either Army Corps of Engineer or nature preserve. So you can't. Have you ever flown seaplane stuff around here, North Carolina?
So I flew through the Carolinas on my way down to Sun and Fun, and I was looking around, and I was definitely seeing that it would have been a little bit of a struggle. What I do if I'm ever going to land somewhere that I'm not sure that it's not like specifically charted as a seaplane base, first of all, I look at the regulations or I look at the laws associated with that state,
Mhm.
right? So, for example, the state of Michigan, they have a law on the books that says if we have lakes that are seaplane prohibited, we will develop a list. There is no list.
Cool.
It's really confusing because you're like, oh, well, I found this law that says we'll develop a list, but then you're like, well, where's the list? There is no list. All right. So Michigan's like, if it's long enough, send it. But then let's say I go to a different state, like Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a list from the Department of Natural Resources that says no seaplanes here, or seaplanes are allowed here, but these are the conditions in which they're allowed here. But it also says at the bottom of the list, these are only for the bodies of water that we control, which is most of the bodies of water in Wisconsin, but it's not all of the bodies of water in Wisconsin. So since I've looked at the state's regulations, let's say I'm going somewhere that's not on the list of like a, hey, yay, you're good to go. Like, for example, Racine County here in Wisconsin just straight up says no seaplanes in any of our bodies of water within the county of Racine.
Makes sense.
There's no questions, ifs, ands, or buts about it. Pewaukee County is another one that says no seaplanes or aircraft are allowed to take off from within the limits of our city or county parks.
Makes sense.
Okay. Now, from the county level, let's say Door County is a perfect example. Door County themselves has no limitations other than what is placed by the Department of Natural Resources, DNR. So I ended up having to call every town in Door County and say, hey, can I land a seaplane in your harbor? And they say, well, we don't have anything that says you can't. And I was like, all right, who am I talking to? And, you get their name and phone number and whatnot of who you called. And I write it down in a little notebook. So that if my airplane ever does get impounded because I put it somewhere that somebody says I shouldn't be, I have a reference to go back to and be like, look, no, I talked to this person at this building, this place at this time and this date that said this was okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. North Carolina, I don't know of many seaplane bases that are public in North Carolina. I definitely wouldn't land a seaplane in the ocean unless you don't want it to be around for very long. So go ahead and do it. You can go to Jack Brown's. They'll get you your seaplane rating for less than $2,000. Super cheap. Does that mean that you're qualified to be a seaplane? I hate to say, does that mean you're qualified to be a seaplane pilot? They get you done. Okay. They will check the boxes. You will meet the ACS standards. But they're picking the landing points. They're telling you where to go. You're not evaluating the landing point. The instructor's going, that's a good spot to land.
That makes sense. Right on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it also, no one will rent you a seaplane. Nobody.
On that note, do you have
Nobody
any
will rent you a
quick
seaplane.
up, down, medium on a C-Max? Because that's how. So I started looking into this a little bit by just getting to know amphib planes, right? And the C-Max seemed rather affordable, at least compared to an Icon A5 or something like that. But yeah, I said it's somehow hard to find seaplane or amphib plane pilots around here. So have you ever seen a C-Max or
Yeah,
flown
so
on one, or have any opinion on those?
So I interviewed a pilot at Sun and Fun who has a C-Max, and he likes it. He does really like it. It's composite, so corrosion's not as big of a concern. It's LSA, so I think it's like LSA or Light Sport Experimental. Either way, it's LSA, so the avionics are cheaper. Finding someone to maintain them is really going to be your issue, right? Sure, it's a Rotax engine. So Rotax engines, they're super simple. But the problem with a composite is you need to find effectively a cirrus mechanic. Let's say you ding it against a dock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You can't just go to any willy-nilly AMP that's good with sheet metal because they don't know how to do, Sure, they learn how to do composites in AMP training, but very likely, unless they're at a cirrus repair facility or at a composite repair facility, that was the last time that they did composite repair.
Yes.
Okay. I like the lakes. I know they're old. I know they're they're getting up there in age. I do like the C-Max. I would just make sure that you talk to some mechanics around where you're at to make sure you've got somebody that's actually capable and willing to maintain it. Because I know when I bought my Lake, I didn't think of that. I didn't think, oh, I was just like, oh, it's a Lycoming. It's an airplane. Any AMP should be willing and able to work on this. No. My first annual, I had to fly 5 hours to get my first annual done when I first bought the thing because the mechanic on my field was like, I don't know anything about that, dude. Good luck. And sure, I could have gone. There was a couple other places I could have gone, but like they didn't seem very reputable. They seemed very much like they might pencil whip it or I don't know. But I didn't want to go there because it just seemed like shady places. So I found a good place to go, but it was 4 hours away. But I mean, I'm looking at the C-Max right now. I mean, I'm looking at specs. Their website, I do see that they put the C-Max on rocks. Like they moored it out and like kind of rested it on some rocks, which is not something that I would do on my airplane.
Yeah, I was gonna say beaching a
I'm
plane
trying to find like
looked
useful
really
load.
fun, but I'm not sure how good that is to the hull.
Well, beaching on like sand, I wouldn't be concerned about. Beaching on like effectively a stagnant body of water with rocks, I wouldn't be too concerned about. The problem where I get concerned is if there's waves that are going to be rocking my airplane on a hard surface,
Makes sense.
right? Because if a wave hits, then it pushes it real hard onto a rock. Congratulations, I've got a submarine. I'm trying to find like useful load and stuff like that on this. I'm seeing their Sport LSA, it's 630 miles of range, cruise speed, maximum, not cruise speed, maximum speed of 134, cruise speed of 115. That's not bad. And this is in miles per hour. That's not bad for a something powered by a Rotax.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I
so
think the only
that was
thing
good. I mean, it's certainly not a cross-country machine like a Cherokee 6 or something, but I also don't think I would take a seatplane up and go like, let me fly somewhere for 5 hours first. I'm typically, right, going to a lake within an hour somewhere, just having fun at a lake. And I
yeah.
think useful load was somewhere in the
I mean,
500s, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah. Okay, I've got it. Yeah, empty weight 17 to 15, max takeoff weight of 1320. So useful load 600 pounds. You throw 26 gallons of gas in it, 98 octane. So I mean, it might weigh slightly less than 100 low lead, but I mean, just for the example calculator, we're looking at 6 times 26, 156. So 600 minus 156, 444 pounds of people. That would be my limiting factor because I take my airplane camping and I fill it. I am at gross of 2,700.
That makes sense. Right on. Yeah, I think the advantage, at least I still have now, is I have a 7-year-old son, and luckily not the heaviest myself. So right now we might still be able to throw a tent in there as well. But
Yeah, I mean that's I mean I like them. They're 185. It looks like brand new. Let's go to Trade a Plane. See if we can find any used. So there is, oh wow, there's an 09 C-Max for 50 grand.
see, that's
Huh?
what I was saying.
Yeah, I mean,
They seem to be pretty affordable in that category.
yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, there's not a whole lot of pictures. What's it equipped with? C-Max, non-folding wings. Oh, last flown was in 2023.
Yeah, that's not great.
Variable pitch propeller does not seem to function. Engine runs and has been cranked and warmed up from time to time. Sold where is as is. Okay, so I can definitely see why they only want 50 grand for it.
That's fair. However, I'm just seeing one on controller.com, a 2014 for 85. VFR flight
Controller
rules.
dock.
No known damage history or logs present. It's like 250 hours on the engine.
You saying that there's somebody trying to sell an '09 one for the cost of a brand new one?
So it's interesting. I think
That's
what I remember
that's a
is they have a
stretch.
ton of options. So there's anything from do you want a parachute on it to they even have an IFR and autopilot model. So I think my guess is that this one might be one of the truly decked out ones that new might be more in the 300 or so range. I think if you deck it like all the way out, I think new it can go to like
Oh,
300K with autopilots and IFR and parachute and folding wings. I think is an option and all that different stuff.
yeah. Um,
That's some cool
so
avionics in there.
what I do know about I think it's Dynon. Yeah, Dynon. Dynon makes some really cool stuff, but they're not I tried to talk to them at Oshkosh and they don't I'm not on their approved aircraft list.
Mm,
So
got it.
the C-Rack, the C-Max, I heard of a seaplane flight school that they started up with them and they just didn't get enough people. If you're looking for even cheaper, I've seen the C-Rays
Oh yeah.
are pretty good. Um, and if you look on like TikTok or Instagram, there's a guy he's called the Commercial Pilot, right? That's his handle. He owns a Sea Ray. And this guy's super friendly. He'd probably be more than happy to tell you about it. He's up in Michigan.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So
It's a good tip.
yeah, just the one thing with lighter, smaller seaplanes is they don't handle waves very well.
Mhm.
The smaller they are, the more they get pushed around by the waves, right? The Albatross could technically take like freaking, I think it was like 8-foot waves
Wow.
was like its limit. But the Albatross the thing weighs like 14,000
Right
pounds,
on.
right? My airplane's limit is 18 inches. I think the C Maxes are roughly around the same.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense.
So, of
Very cool. Thank
course.
you.
But yeah, of course, if you got any other questions, the Discord is still here. I still come in and read, any messages. So, if you got any questions, whether it be seaplanes, whether it be IFR or whatever rating you're happen to go for next, don't hesitate to reach out. All
Awesome.
right.
Appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. Good to meet you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, enjoy the
You
rest of your
too.
day.
Thanks. Bye.